very end. She was given a good suggestion. Molly, I don't know about you. I had a great group. We had a lot of conversation. We could have done that for another 2 hours tonight.
We had a better group, Brian. I'm sorry to tell you, but I'm glad you had a good discussion. We could have used more time. I'd love to hear from the staff. How did your breakout sessions go?
We had an awesome conversation in breakout room 7. Really robust conversation, focused a lot on events and how to improve. It was overall fantastic.
But nothing compared to breakout room number 9.
Amelia, what was the biggest takeaway? What was the most informative thing was there like an aha thing that people really felt good about?
You know, when we delved into event focus, we talked about kind of what are the barriers to people attending events. And we brought up, Stephanie from New York brought up a very good point of, we're competing a lot with folks with second and third degrees from other institutions. So it's really kind of finding that balance of how do we bring the focus in on Emory and not competing with Duke Medical or Harvard Law. So some good conversations focused around how to focus in on Emory events.
So what we wanted, so it sounds like 7 was the best group of all. Congratulations to you all. I'm just kidding. But
oh, no.
So here's what we want to do. We are not going to do some formal group to group to group to group, because that just kind of never works and it gets very dry very quickly. But we do want to hear some of the themes you all talked about and the things that are working, the things that aren't working. And we're not going to constrict it to, very specific questions. But if y'all, let's start with the groups of board members, not the board presidents, but the board members. And if some of you could just kind of shout out, and we'll discuss either stuff you reconciled or stuff you had questions about. Let's go from there. And Amelia got us started, but let's keep going. Anybody, or I'll start calling.
Gina looks like she's stepping in.
Yeah, so I was going to say one thing that we talked about around events was variety and diversity of events. So trying to have things that are not at the same time, like not always on a weeknight, and not always focused on sort of the younger alumni population. Try some different timing, try some different types of events to pull out. We had some representation from the over 40 network. So making sure that there are events that are of interest to different groups.
It might be great before the chat is over at the top of the hour, if folks want to throw in the chat one event that has been really successful for them, because we had a lot of that conversation as well. Then we'll leave here with a huge list of events that people can draw from that have been successful in cutting across different demographics.
And I just want to jump into everyone, because we had a lot of event conversations too, that just keep in mind that your engagement plans that we talk about, they're also more than just events. So please never feel like you are not doing enough for your members if you're not producing a ton of events. It is about so much more than that. And we as staff are also here to help you not just think what's the next event, but other ways, how else you can engage your members. What does member engagement look like beyond events? We have lots of ideas. I could start calling some of you out because I know some of you are trying new things, but I won't do that right now. Davis, though, I know has a point to make.
Davis, you're on.
Yeah, I wanted to share a really interesting takeaway that I think threaded several of the conversation points in our group. As it relates to events and for the purpose of recruiting, for the purpose of building presence in your area, it's really important, I think, for board members to commit to having a presence at their own events. I think sometimes we can have opportunities or structures where the board members, one or two, maybe come together to do a great work on putting something together, and inviting the other board members to come to just be ambassadors for the network has been hugely successful. And particularly the alums and my group that we're discussing focused on the advantages of really showing up with their brand, and especially in our lovely networks outside of Atlanta, having that Emory presence and is going to make you more approachable at these events. And that will just lead to a sort of trickle down effect of networks and connections for the purpose of recruiting, for the purpose of building Emory in that region. So really big kudos to the alums I was speaking with on those points.
Thank you, Davis. Other thoughts coming out of these are great. I'm looking at these on the side here. Wimbledon viewing. I
Let's
love
open this up to the president's group as well. I know my group, we
well,
talked a
and
little bit about that. So if any,
yeah, and I would call on
Chime in.
Donna because Donna was talking about the problems in her area because she's in the DC area where there's a lot. Sorry to put you on the spot, Donna, but there's, you know, it's a very big metropolitan area. And if you, Donna, if you don't mind sharing what you were sharing with our group about how you address that and the way you try to find different times to do stuff.
Yeah, so in DC, the region is really big. So we represent DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And the distance can be very wide. And as a result, we try to look at varied activities in various cities, even in each state. So when I say state, you can be in each state within 10 minutes. Somewhat, but it really depends on what types of activities we're going to do. If you're don't live in DC proper and you have a family, then we may want to do an event that may be in Alexandria, which is Northern Virginia. We did a watercolor paint and sip. So that was great. But we do happy hours in DC, so that will appeal to some other people. One of the successful events, I haven't dropped in the chat yet, but we launched our 40+ network last year. And we did an event at a sculpture garden out in, I guess that's considered, I don't know if that's considered Bethesda, maybe North Bethesda. And we had great attendance. So I think it was a combination of the location that we did it, because it was the 40+ network kickoff event. So we had a lot of people to attend, but I think it was something very different than we had done before. And so that appealed to a lot of people, and people could bring their families if they wanted to. So I think we were able to hit all of the key points with that event, but just making sure as a network that we're being considerate of alumni who are all over the region, I think is the important part to take away from this.
Thanks for sharing that. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot, Donna. I just thought it was really important because I know that area and how complicated it is to try to hit everybody because the metropolitan area is so huge. These ideas are still coming on the side. I love the axe throwing. Never tried it, but one of these days. Other thoughts on activities? I also, we have a lot of questions to pose to you, but just, is there a way to capture these, Denise? Are you going to be able to capture all these activities that are blowing up?
Yes, I'll just download the chat.
Okay, that's excellent. One of the themes that came up in our group was planning. And it came up in two ways. One was, you know, obviously people like to plan for the year, but the other thing that came up was being flexible. You know, Mary Lauren is very organized. She's a project manager. So she was talking about how, Mary Lauren, is it in the fall where you do your annual planning? Putting you on the spot again.
Late summer this year.
You did it in the summer?
Late summer, yeah.
And can you talk about how that's worked for you to lay out those activities?
Yeah, so we had a meeting and we're with just our board members, and we kind of talked about what events we wanted to do for the year and how many of them and roughly when they would be. And kind of started out, you know, with the individual small committees kind of being tasked with developing those events. And yeah, we try to revisit them when we have our meetings. So that's something that's worked well.
Have you had success with planning for the year, or are you having more success with short-term planning?
you might want to call on Dino. I think that's who covered this at the event. Covered this during our session, was how he handles planning with his board members.
We did annual planning, Emory Creative Network, and it was very helpful. It was less about specific events and more about what was the volume of events that we felt we could handle in a year. What was a good mix, and just kind of laying out more of a framework, and then finding events that would meet what we felt were the needs of the network and that we thought were manageable to our board so that we could actually make those happen instead of feeling like we were overcommitted. And that's been really successful so far and is also making us encouraged because it's successful. So I'm happy to share that if anybody would like to have a version of our framework that we built.
And if I could piggyback on that, so at the beginning of the year, Alex led us in a pretty good planning strategy where we mapped out the year. But one thing that we found that worked well for us, because people are just so busy and it's hard for them to commit to like a role specific, I guess, function throughout the year. We had like leads for each event where we assigned, okay, this event will be for you. And we found that people were a lot more, I guess, able to commit to leading one event where they know like, okay, on this day, or this part of the month and the year, I'm responsible for this. And they could put in, say, a week or two and know that, okay, now my commitment is done. Although everyone helped support, we found that people were a lot more open to that.
Thanks for sharing. Go ahead.
Molly, I was just going to follow up on something Sarah said, beyond event planning, ways that particularly board members can do engagement as well. And I've seen this in action. Yandong brought up, he's on the San Francisco Network Board, and he brought up in our conversation that it doesn't have to be on a grand scale. You can think, if you have a conversation at an event with 2 or 3 alumni that maybe hadn't been previously engaged, and then do some follow-up, encourage them to attend future events, that can have great rewards. And I know Jacob on the Seattle board has made a concerted effort to have conversations, reach out to people, do that follow-up sort of peer-to-peer. That's really impactful too, in addition to all of the great events that people are putting in the chat and discussing.
Thanks, Amy. Karen?
I plan some events for our NYC Alumni Network. I'm not on the board, but I sort of thinking like, certain months of the year are, for example, February is Black History Month. May, I believe, is Asian American History Month, but making events kind of coinciding to kind of get more people involved. So there's a big Korean network in New York. And so in May, maybe I do these tennis events and social sporting events. So maybe kind of involving Asian American history with Asian American history, whatever, with a sporting event, so that you could get more and make it a broader event as opposed to just kind of a, anyway, there you go.
One of the takeaways from one of the groups I was in, which kind of surprised me, was, and I apologize, I can't remember who was talking about it, but said, those events where 5 people show up, they're not always a loss because you get so much more time with a person. And whoever was talking about it said that they were doing an event, 5 people showed up, 2 became board members. So it's taking opportunities even when you think you're missing the boat because not as many people have showed up, taking advantage of that, and you never know what's going to happen. Have other people have that experience? The small events where things happen?
I definitely can say that we have in Tampa. And one of the things that I like to do after an event is make sure that I take a picture of the sign up sheet and email everybody that was there. And especially the folks that I spoke to while they were there. Just to say, we really appreciate you coming out, especially if it's somebody that we haven't seen before. And to give them the opportunity to contact me anytime they have ideas that they'd like to see for programming. Because like I said, our board is awesome, but we're also pretty young. We're on the pretty young side, and Tampa St. Pete is not on the young side. Our overall, and so one thing we've been trying to do is find stuff that the older population might be into, but how do we get in touch with them? And so finding folks whenever we can is kind of been key for us.
Other thoughts on that?
Molly, and I'll add, I mean, from a staff member perspective, I think that that's how the Tallahassee Network Board got started, because 2 people literally showed up at an event in the middle of the pandemic and they became our co-presidents. And, you know, they're now, you know, have grown, and Letitia's leading that. And, you know, there's 7 healthy board members in a population that really serves a smaller group, but they're engaged and they want to bring their community together. So I do think that, you know, and I encourage, as Chris was saying, for the presidents, the board members to really do that and really start giving them suggestions on, you know, the next event to plan, or perhaps partner them with somebody else on the board so that they can co-plan something together. I was a quick little, another example in the last Wonderful Wednesday that Miami had, somebody wanted, somebody who's not on the board wanted to have a wine tasting. And I'm like, great, that's a great idea, as long as you want to co-lead it. And I'll connect you with somebody on the board so that you all can partner with each other. And they said yes, actually 2 new volunteers who now will be coded as part of a contribution to the Miami network. So I think that, you know, that is a good first small step to get somebody engaged. And then that may lead to a board member, it may not, but at least you have somebody else who's willing to get their hands dirty and do something on your behalf.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Alex. Appreciate it. Other experiences with sort of the small events that turn into 1,000 flowers blooming. One of the things that Kyle from DC was talking about is their board, when there's an event, their board members kind of have this, it's not required, but they all make a commitment. And this is obviously for the bigger events, where they each are committed to talking to 4 or 5 people. And then they can have real individual conversations with those, follow up with those people. And it's that intentionality, and Brian and I have seen this over and over again. It's that intentionality that pays dividends. You all, we didn't talk at length about it in the breakout I was in, but COVID really did a number on recruiting and engaging people. And initially people were hungry for, you know, the Zoom calls worked initially, and then they didn't. I mean, and I think that experience is probably true for you as well as virtually every other volunteer organization in the country. What we are seeing, and I'm expecting that you are seeing this too, is there's just a lot more enthusiasm for getting back out and doing stuff and getting engaged with people, because people are starting to feel like it's safe to do that. I don't know if you all are seeing that, but based on our experience, if you haven't seen it yet, you're going to be seeing it soon.
And I'll just add to that, something that came up in our group is people are ready to get out and do stuff, but there's a limit to how many happy hours that you can have. It was definitely something I heard from a few folks in our group, is that it really is important to start coming up with these other creative ideas to bring people out, whether it's looking at different audiences. That, you know, a happy hour is good occasionally, but that's always the easy event to plan. But it's really important for boards and for organizations to go beyond that when trying to engage their folks and get them out.
One of the things that in our group, I think we were group number 3, and I'm sorry, but we were the best group, just saying.
I had heard you were, yes, okay.
Is bringing speakers from campus is always successful, and it doesn't have to always be the president, but bringing speakers from campus to the regions is always a big draw for events.
I have to take that moment then, because you just teed it up for me to shout out the South Florida volunteers, because I've never seen, we have close to 300 people signed up for an event tomorrow night. I've never even seen anything close to that. Jennifer Crabb-Kyles, have you, in all your time at Emory? I've never seen that in South Florida or the state of Florida.
I know I said that in our group, I cannot believe that many people are registered for the event. So that I think it's a record.
And that does get us, because Molly, you might be asking this, peer-to-peer outreach. I heard that there were some wonderful notes written, and it's just hearing it. It doesn't matter if it's the president, because I honestly don't think it's just because the president's coming. I think there are other aspects of the event that they were able to tease out and then put in their voice to local alums.
But the
Yeah,
big
and
thing there- oh, sorry. The big thing is that it's not coming from staff. You all respond so much more when you all send messages to each other. That's the key. Whether it's BCC, email merge, whatever the style might be, it's another alum talking to another alum. So 100% Sarah.
Yeah, congratulations on that. Any other quick hints at why so many people? That we talked about the peer-to-peer. Anything else that you've done in terms of marketing? Because I know that's an issue for y'all. Is how do we market these events?
I was gonna say, let's see, I know we've got some South Florida folks on the
Yeah.
call. Maybe hear from one of the South Florida folks.
Come
about how
on,
you've been so
South Florida.
successful in marketing.
It's
May I call out Kelly Healy because she's trying to get in there and say something, and I want to give her space.
Can we go to Kelly right after Dino speaks about South Florida?
I was going to say really quickly, it's also the location is really nice. It's at a very nice venue, pretty chic part of town. And I think that helps. Oftentimes people like to do things that are exclusive, and getting to eat at one of the best restaurants, one of the nicest venues part of town. I think that adds to the allure.
Thanks, Dino. That makes total sense to me. Where's Kelly?
I'm here. I think crosstalk, in other words, supporting other committees. So think of your committee as truly part of a bigger network of board members. So instead of it being tracks in parallel, it's more like the New York City Metro Map. So whether or not it's you attending another board members committee's events, even if you can't read the whole book, at least show up at the book club, or at the end of your event, be abreast of what the upcoming events might be for the other committees. So for instance, if there's an Emory Cares event and there is that book club around the corner and they might need a few more people to attend, say, hey, next week we still have some spots available, or there's unlimited spots available for this other upcoming event. Those are ways to, again, breed interest in upcoming programs, not just within your individual committee, but other committees, and really supporting the other board members with their projects that might be outside of your realm of sort of expertise or passion. Just showing up for events, their events, co-supporting them is a way to, encourage other alumni.
Kelly, that's a great point. And for those of you who aren't in New York or DC, where there's all these committees, if you are in cities where there are other networks, what can staff do to make sure you have that information at your fingertips so you don't feel like you always have to cover the next month? But also for those of you who don't have multiple networks in your city, there are plenty of virtual activities and programs that people can participate in on their own time. So again, that's something that your staff partner can provide you with. It's a great point, Kelly.
And I want to call out Jeff in our group. I won't make him speak unless he wants to, but I don't remember what region he was in, but he actually said as a board member, he felt compelled to try to get to an event from another group. So he wanted to just to support for the groups to support one another in locations where that's possible.
I think I'm grateful that we have so many options. I wish I could go to more other than Emory Cares and some of the networking events. I try to go to the signature events, but I mean, the easy way for me to stay abreast when I'm at an Emory Cares event and I want to say, hey, we have this great, wine tasting next week, or this venue sort of event, Wonderful Wednesdays, is our social media is really well maintained. And so I sort of cheat and can look at our IG account and see, okay, we've got some things coming up I can promote just by looking quickly on my phone. So, props and cheers to our social media committee that oversees that.
So Kelly, is that one of your most successful ways to get the marketing out, is social media?
Social media, I mean, IG seems to be the most popular way, and then featuring things sort of in a storyboard, which is that 24-hour sort of panel that Jen and Alicia managed. That really, I think, just improves readership and attendance.
Great. Other thoughts on y'all have such brilliant ideas for events. I'm just watching this list grow and grow, but marketing them We talked about social media. Anything we haven't talked about or that you heard about in your group, Brian, that we need to put out there?
You know what, Sarah mentioned peer-to-peer. I'd love for us to drill down a little bit further on what that has looked like for some groups that have successfully used peer-to-peer. What were some of the sort of tactically the things that folks did that helped drove attendance or drove activity?
Hi, Brian. This is Brad McGill in Birmingham. I have a comment on that. We talked about this in our small group, but the idea of getting some key performance indicators or metrics from the staff on what would be considered a successful meeting for our group and our market, our size, our history would be very useful because everybody responds to a challenge. And if we know that we're at 14 signed up and 20 would be a success, let's say, everybody can agree to go get one more person apiece. So getting success factors dialed into this, I think is very useful.
Kevin, you want to comment on that?
Well, I wanted to add that, and Linda Smith and Steve Rush are here tonight, two of my superstar board members, but one of the things that's been really successful for us is to, in our communications, in every way, on social or in our email blasts, is to have a voice. We've agreed that there's a voice that we want to assume in our communications, one that is friendly, that is inviting, and my colleagues have heard this a gazillion times. We always try to send the message that our network is about Emory giving back and that we want to hear our members' stories. And that has really resonated with the particular group that I work with, the over 60 group. So for whatever that's worth, that's worked well for us.
Thanks for sharing that, Kevin. Other thoughts on that? The member stories. And I think it was in the chat earlier.
I know I'll call on Shion or Ellie from Boston because I know Boston's starting a spotlight series or did start a spotlight series.
Yeah, happy to talk about it. So Boston actually, and to kind of some of the points that were mentioned earlier in kind of addressing different audiences, right? Creating different events that pull in different types of audiences. One idea that we had, and Shion's been fantastic, is actually highlighting different members of the community, which serves kind of the broader purpose on connectivity. And then actually hosting a happy hour at the end of the kind of highlights, where all the highlighted members will be there. So you kind of have a sense of who's going to be there, right? So it's both networking and in addition to kind of building that community and understanding who's in Boston.
Thanks, Ellie. Someone else, was there somebody else from Boston who was going to add to that?
Well, I know Brad in Birmingham, you all have done it too. Brad, I don't know if you can speak to that spotlight series.
We have done that. Yeah, we have definitely focused on making it personal as much as we can. You know, Birmingham's a smaller market. Although there are a surprising number of alums here, but we all make a point out of reaching out to our personal friend groups and professional relationships before each meeting and trying to personalize it and then share who else is going to be there for the meetings. There's no question that personal touch makes a big difference.
Steve?
Yeah, this was during COVID, but this was very successful. We had a big just a kind of a get together online, and every attendee shared 2 minutes, and they talked about what was it while you're at Emory that impacted your life the most. It's incredible because it brought the focus back to Emory. It let people know a little bit about the other people on the meeting, and it just very warm and it was great. It's a good idea, so I would recommend that.
That's a
Was
great
Julie
idea.
a big part of that conversation?
Yeah, did you find out what that was, Brian? I'll
He
catch
was
up with you
invited.
later. Somebody in the chat said, how do you explain Dooley? So I guess it could be a mystery for a little while longer. Other thoughts on this personal connection that we've been talking about and how you incorporate that into your activities and even into your board meetings?
So Molly, I'll share something that, so the Miami Network was trying to launch a young alumni committee. And what they did, so I gave them the kind of the data of the folks who had graduated from 10 years. But what they did, in addition to sending them like a random email, right, like we all send, is that they found these folks on LinkedIn and send them a quick, short personal message. And I had never seen that many new faces. Granted, it was last May, so it was kind of people were eager to come back. But that LinkedIn message was more effective, in my opinion, than any of the other social platforms that we have activated in South Florida. The other shout out is to Palm Beach. So they've been very, very effective with doing peer-to-peer outreach, because I run a list of the people who are most engaged based on the demographic. I kind of categorize them by activity, and then they each take a chunk of about 50 people, and then they kind of commit to doing outreach for those folks within a given period of time. So shout out to Jeff Gordon and Bernie, you know, who are here, because again, they hold each other accountable in the outreach that they've been doing.
Thanks, Alice, because it sounds like Florida's got it going on. Anything else that we? Well, yeah,
Molly,
go
I
ahead.
just want to follow, I have to follow up to that. How do you all hold each other accountable? Because that came up quite a bit.
Well, Jeff kind of does roll call again. Jeff Gordon, he's not in the line anymore,
Yeah,
but
he was on earlier.
Jeff just has a presence. So very much he says, I expect all of you to join us at our next event. I expect all of you to do outreach. And again, I think it's that mutual respect. I think Jeff shows up for everybody, and so people show up for him. And also just building that relationship. We built this board in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. None of these people had ever met each other. So I'm really proud of this relationship that they've grown to have in the 2 years that they've been in service.
You know, I'm so glad you brought that up, Alex. And I know, Karen, you wanted to say something, but we were finishing our discussion in our breakout, I was talking about some of the tips to leading a board and being on a board. Accountability obviously is very crucial, but you brought up relationship building, Alex, and that is a key component of all of it. People are going to stay on a board and be engaged if they've built relationships with other people. And so I'm really glad you brought that up. I think another key piece of this is respect for people's time. One of the people on our call was saying that their board has such busy members. It's a small board. They have such busy members. They have 30 minutes every week, because that's what they know they can count on their board members to engage in. So the board members have clarity. They know 30 minutes, it's going to start on time, it's going to end on time. We're not suggesting that for everybody, but it's understanding who your board members are, building relationships with them, and being very realistic about what time people have to give. And I'm sorry, Kieran, because you were trying to get in a minute ago, and I want to let you talk.
Yeah, it's not, I'm not a board member. I'm outside of this, but I just wanted to say that, Jen Foster, who's our NYC alumni coordinator, has really reached out to me whenever I decide to go to an event. She says, hey, pitch your event that is coming up, because I host a few events. So if a board member is hosting an event, then it is like their opportunity to go to another event to kind of, pitch their next event. So, I would say that it's important for people to go to one or more events. If you're hosting one, just go to another one to show your face and to give your pitch.
Thanks, Karen. Can I go back to this whole notion of accountability? How do y'all hold each other accountable? Any other examples of that we can talk about on this call? And I know our time is slowly eating up, but accountability is a real key piece of this. And we see some of that in your feedback.
I heard Mary Lauren in our room, Molly. Mary Lauren talked about how she's a project manager and she tries to bring that to the board. And then Kevin just noted that 60 Plus has 3 project managers on their board. So I think now all the networks are now envious of you. So what are some project management essentials then that we could all tap in to our boards?
Those you project managers on the call, let's start to, okay, Steve.
Okay, Steve.
Steve, you're up.
Sorry, you're still muted,
You're
Steve.
unmuted, Steve.
Yeah, sorry. One thing that, as a president, I make very clear to the person who takes on a project, if you don't do this, it's not going to happen. Well, I'm there to support you. The rest of the team's there to support you. But I say this came up on our call too. Just make it clear. If you step up to do this project, it's yours. And people from Emory, they want to take on responsibility. They like that. I mean, because most of them have very responsible jobs, so they're used to that and they like that. And I think just be supportive, but also be direct.
Thank you, Steve. That makes sense to me. That's my experience. What about?
I want to
Other
jump on that
presidents-
supportive piece. There was, I'm trying to remember who it was in our group. I'm scrolling through names. I don't think the person on, someone was talking about how they did outreach. Well, I'm going to start the story, and then if the person who was saying it, just interrupt me if it was your story and take it over. But they had a board member who was just being a little less responsive than normal. And the board president reached out and said, hey, what's going on? You know, how are things going? It turned out they had something going on in their life at that moment. They needed some extra time, but just doing that outreach, checking in with that person. Molly talked about relationship building and how that really relates to accountability as well. Just if someone has committed to something and they're not coming through, to proactively reach out and say, hey, you show a little empathy, try to understand what's going on. And odds are they're going to want to do more for you, even if they can't do that exact thing at that exact moment. They'd be like, you know what? I know I said I'd do this in February. Can we do it in April instead? They're going to want to help by reaching out. So I know I didn't tell that story nearly as well as the person in our group did, but hopefully the point came across.
Yeah, Brian, let me add to that. My experience, and I know it tracks with yours, is sometimes people have to leave for a while, but they'll often come back. And so it's just being sympathetic about that and being gracious about that will make all the difference. Other thoughts? Go ahead, Steve.
So I just to add something to what I said before. We have checklists from doing past events. So if someone does take on an event, they've got a map to follow. And it's pretty simple. So I'm not, before I sound like I'm just going to dump this on this person, that's not it at all. We have a whole way to support them. That's very important.
Right. And Steve, we would love to share your checklist, and we have event checklists too that we use internally at the EAA, so we can certainly combine and share those out.
Sure.
Other thoughts on this whole notion of accountability? It's a biggie. It's probably the most important of everything. Because there's nothing more frustrating to a board when one person isn't carrying their weight or doesn't seem engaged, and how you deal with that. Anyone? It's tough.
Just share that, you know, Denise did a great job creating our breakout room because it was all relatively new board members. So it was good for them to hear from each other. And one suggestion that Yan Dong had, and I don't know if he's still here, if he wants to mention it, or I can mention it on his behalf. He suggested maybe a closed Facebook group for board members in all of the networks to connect with one another.
I will say that does come up on every training we have, and people don't use it, but
really?
So we would love to hear, and Denise, maybe we can add that and follow up. We could do a quick survey because we would love to have that. I would absolutely love to have one place for you all to share insights and ideas and questions with each other. So I'm always happy to try again. And maybe LinkedIn's the better platform.
And quick plug, there's an Emory Connects group of that already.
There is, I know. So
there
it just
you
might
go,
not
there
be
you
Emory
go.
Connects that people want to go to. So if it's LinkedIn or Facebook people would go to instead of Emory Connects, that's okay.
And what we find for groups that do that, and some groups do it very successfully, the private Facebook groups, is it needs to have volunteer ownership. It needs to have not just one administrator, it's too big for one person, but 3 or 4 or 5 different administrators who are responsible for keeping that conversation going and for posting questions, for engaging people. So that's where we've seen a lot of good success, is when it's truly a staff, staff keeps an eye on it, but but it's really a volunteer-led conversation.
I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, I think most people, most board members would welcome it. It's just finding which particular platform would be most welcomed. And that might even be region specific or geographically, demographically catered. So, the New York network might find that Facebook is preferred, or maybe LinkedIn is preferred, but do pool, I guess, the cohort and see what do people most want, what's going to give the highest yield and options.
Denise is asking, what about a listserv? So there's a lot of good ideas out here. And let me just say this. One of the things, and again, Brian and I work with a lot of organizations. The staff here, Sarah and her staff are really committed to finding opportunities for you to share with each other. We don't always see that. So that's why I want to tip my hat to you, Sarah, because sometimes it's easier to just kind of hope everything's going okay, but you know this from your staff partners. They're trying to check in with you to see how things are going, but I know they're committed to finding ways for you to communicate, whether it's virtual chats like this, or whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever. I know they'll follow up on that. I know I'm supposed to turn it to you in a minute, Sarah, but let me just say one more thing. We have gotten to know the staff a little bit, Brian and I. Being with you all tonight has been a real honor. I'm very impressed. Often when we do these trainings, there's just a lot of frustration. I don't sense that at all. I think y'all are looking for opportunities and looking for things to do better. And I'm just really impressed with the level of the discourse and the number of ideas. I'm nothing about Dooley at the end of this, but I will find out. But Brian, anything you would add?
Just, so appreciate the great conversation that we had. I know that the challenge with something like this is you never feel like you have enough time. We thought about scheduling this for a 5-hour evening event, but we didn't think anybody would show up because we knew you could actually use all that time to continue sharing ideas. So we did try to sort of get all this in 2 hours, but we hope this is just the next step. And I know Sarah and her team will be doing this. It's just the next step in you all continuing to learn from one another and talking to one another. I love the idea that you're looking for chats and other ways to communicate, because what we find in large organizations, and you all are a large group, there's a lot of you all over the country, is that you learn best from one another. All of the answers are there. They are all within this group. It's just a matter of matching up the person who has the question to the person who has the answer. So I do hope you all will continue to communicate with one another and work with your staff, because it's only going to lead to just more great things for the university and all of your fellow alumni.
Yeah, very impressive.